What happens to Saturn, the planet of restriction and limitation, when it's in the element of air? Let's talk about air. This is the element associated with the rational mind and thinking, which includes the human capacity to reflect, to be conscious of the self, and to issue value judgments about all that transpires. When it comes to the intellect, however, humans are underachievers. Most people have very few original or creative thoughts. They think the same thing today that they thought yesterday about mundane matters, and they fall super short when it comes to abstractions or conceptualizations. Most of what people view as thought is really opinion, and they hold the same opinions for years on end. We know very little about the basics, let alone the mysterious areas of the mind, such as ESP, telepathy, manifestation, remote viewing, or telekinesis. And it boils down to the fact that humans are afraid of the power of thought. Many issues surrounding the intellect come to the fore of the chart when Saturn is in air. We see a lot of struggles having to do with thinking, especially learning and detachment. These hard lessons are the way in which Saturn offers us the opportunity to develop various parts of the intellect and gain mastery over it. How all this expresses itself depends upon which air sign we're talking about. A mastered Saturn in air can be extremely helpful in a lifetime, however. Without work, they tend to be ungrounded and chaotic. But when the appropriate work is done and the pain and insecurities are handled, Saturn in the air signs can be serious and organized, and they can concentrate on a single idea. In fact, the major advances in our world, from the torch and the spear launcher to the microchip and the satellite, come from a disciplined and developed mental faculty. Saturn in Gemini is associated with learning, with information gathering, that part of the intellect, the part that wants to pass information on to others. This Saturn often has an issue with feeling like they should be doing something with the knowledge they have, and other people will tell them, you know so much about such and such, you should do it for a living. Get it out into the marketplace and become an official expert. Saturn in Gemini often wonders if they should use what they know to advance or just enjoy it without all the responsibility. Hence, they can end up being a storehouse of useless information that they aren't doing anything with. They'll feel like they're good at theory, but lack the ability to bring what they know down to earth. A running theme is, okay, I have a curiosity about life, so do I have to make something out of it? What if there's no material end? There's no material end to a lot of what people enjoy doing, so I think that's an answer. Saturn in Gemini has a strength in being able to perceive, analyze, retrieve information, and then importantly, move along. Now, Saturn brings irrational fears to the sign it inhabits. Since Gemini is associated with communication, you can also find blockages in speaking and writing. A good example of this is dyslexia, stuttering, or some other strain on easy communication with others. There's a kind of natural give and take, an in and out, a back and forth to Gemini. That's one of the reasons the sign is associated with the lungs and breathing. When Saturn is in Gemini, you find quite a bit of asthma reported because that's a manifestation of Saturn's restrictions in Gemini. Asthma is one of those diseases that has a high psychosomatic rate. Certain diseases have that connection more so than others. Saturn in Gemini can have trouble breathing freely. This placement also needs to breathe freely on an intellectual level and on the level of communication. Another factor to mention here is that while they may end up being great at knowledge and big ideas and high-level conferencing, when it comes to small talk or chit-chat, they can fall apart. Another way Saturn in Gemini might pan out is someone who was denied an education and then ends up thinking they're stupid. A common thread with Saturn here is feeling inadequate in the Gemini landscape of the mind and scholarly pursuits. This can even include speech that's wrapped up in an anxiety condition. I know one who has no idea what she's saying. There's no content, just fluff. And her words have nothing to do with relating. She's trapped in a blue streak where she doesn't really say anything. There's often a fear, an inability to share personal thoughts and feelings with this placement. But this Saturn also responds well to all forms of mind training and intellectual control. This placement just needs a little discipline. It can also be a top quality journalist and storyteller, embodying the ethics and integrity, the seriousness that only Saturn can bring. Libra is the sign of Saturn's exaltation. This is a rather old idea in astrology that has hung on through the ages, and it means that this sign is a place of heightened functioning and heightened awareness for the planet. Why is Saturn so well placed in Libra? Because Saturn is the planet of order, and Libra is the sign of justice. And so this placement is one that can achieve very high ideals. And since Libra is the sign most associated with balance, you can also see a lot of potential for this placement to be perfectly balanced in terms of the masculine and feminine sides of the psyche. And we can extrapolate this to mean there's a natural skill in balancing all opposites. Therefore, this is a competent negotiator and mediator. But with Saturn in Libra, the sign of love, this placement experiences a lot of disappointment in partnerships. They'll get into situations where relationships end in pain and rejection. Having the planet of fate in the sign of romance can make it seem like relationship difficulties are coming from the outside, such as partners who up and leave without notice, or who aren't who they say they are. People give off a million subliminal signals about who they are from the get-go, and this placement is extremely sensitive to those signals. But then the mind comes in and they think their way out of their intuitions. Saturn in Libra usually makes its biggest mistake by allowing a sizable gap between what they consciously say they want in a partner and what their inner unconscious needs actually are. And they can end up with a feeling that not only are they themselves unlucky in love, but that happiness is dependent upon an outside agency. But the other is always a mirror of the self. There's no way to interact with another without interacting with the self, and there's no way to relate without bringing all your love and all your dysfunctions to bear. Libra is a cardinal active sign. So when Saturn is here, that energy can be blocked. And this placement can get really passive in regards to relationships, just waiting for the right one to come along, as if the right person would mean the perfect relationship. I've also seen Saturn in Libra so afraid of abandonment and disappointment that they play the Don Juan or the Donna Juanita who refuses to get attached because they're petrified of loss. The darkness of this Saturn is matched only by its brilliance in relationships when Saturn's work is well done and a high awareness is achieved. Here you can find a relationship expert, a marriage helper, a couples therapist who brings systems and structures and who can show you how to find the beauty in the reality of a relationship rather than the dream that Libra often likes to dream. Saturn in Aquarius is happiest when they've developed to a point where the mind, body, and emotions are disciplined enough to operate as a tool that serves the inner purposes. What inner purposes? That's a paradox because this Saturn in the last of the air signs isn't personal by nature, it's transpersonal. Saturn in Aquarius surrounds hopes and wishes, clubs and societies, the things that make you larger than yourself. It's a placement associated with those thoughts that take us out of where we are and bring advances, especially in the realm of invention and technology. Here we have the planet of discipline in the sign of the genius. This was the placement of Thomas Edison, who came up with a lot of interesting inventions for his time. And his favorite way to go about it was through trial and error. A tried and true Saturn favorite. Edison said that he never failed, not once. What people call failure is a success because you found yet another way something won't work. We also have the planet of structure in the sign of all humanity. So equality in society is terribly important to this placement because what they're really after is a freer life for everyone. This Saturn wants integration in the group. And because Saturn is where we're naturally blocked, they often can't seem to find that integration. In other words, there's difficulty in making friends and finding a group. a fellowship in which they belong. You'll hear them saying they're too weird to find a cohesive group, or too smart, or too creative, or too something. But a lot of times they're actually afraid of losing themselves in a group, losing their individuality. They worry they'll become part of a mass consciousness, which isn't likely to happen unless they join a cult. It's only a fear that this placement tends to bring along with them. Saturn in Aquarius needs a purpose that permits them a larger expression in a larger group. Likewise, you may see a struggle over the idea of having personal wants. And certainly there may be some guilt to having individual desires that override the concerns of the group. This placement will, for instance, feel guilty that they want some steak when they've promised to be vegan, because the factory farm industry is one big exploitation, abusing workers, animals, local farmers, and the environment. This kind of thing can really eat away at them. They want to make a contribution, you see, and they feel a responsibility to be conscious. Thank you for watching Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk, Saturn in Air. Stay tuned for all the ways you can get in touch for a birth chart reading and complete astrological services. The Saturn series ends next time. Saturn in the water signs to come.